All right, so you want to know what's going on at the Interior Department. I mean, it's been everywhere, right? All these employees suddenly fired. Thousands of them! What is going on?
Yeah, it's quite a whirlwind.
So we're calling this deep dive the Trump efficiency experiment because, well, that's kind of what it feels like. We've been digging through articles, internal memos, you name it, and we're going to break it all down.
You know what gets me? Just how fast it all happened. Like, boom, 2,300 people are out of work, a lot of them just starting out at Interior, too.
Just like that, bam, you're out. So let's start with this OPM directive, Office of Personnel Management, right?
Right.
What did it actually say, and how did it lead to all this?
Well, the directive itself, that's not actually public yet, which just adds to the whole, the confusion.
Yeah.
But from what The Hill and others are reporting, it basically told agencies to fire anyone still on probation. And the OPM even said, get this, the probationary period is a continuation of the job application process, not an entitlement.
Whoa, hold on. So you're doing the job, but you're not guaranteed to keep it, like some kind of super long job interview where they can still say, you're fired.
Yeah, pretty much. And we're talking potentially 200,000 federal employees across the board who could be affected.
That is a lot of people. And then you've got this whole Elon Musk thing going on. He's advising Trump on all this, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And honestly, you can see his influence in this approach.
How so?
Well, I mean, Musk is all about efficiency, right? With his kidneys, it's constant change, questioning everything, no fear of making big moves fast.
Okay, but is that really how government works? You can't just, iterate on environmental rules the way you tweak a Tesla design?
Exactly. That's the big question, isn't it? Musk's world is all speed, agility, bottom line, government, not so much. And that's what makes this whole thing so interesting.
So let's talk specifically about the Interior Department. They handle our national parks, energy production, on federal land, all that, right? What happens to all that under this efficiency experiment?
Well, the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM, they got hit pretty hard. Almost 800 people gone, just like that. These are the folks out there managing grazing, dealing with wildfires, you name it.
Less people for all that work. And we've heard warnings about, Aaron Weiss at the Center for Western Priorities talked about overflowing latrines and polluted streams.
Yeah, I mean, his point is you can't just cut people and not expect there to be real-world consequences. These are the people, the park rangers, scientists, firefighters. They're not just numbers. They're the ones making sure our public lands are taken care of.
It makes me think of, the Endangered Species Program. What happens to that?
Okay, imagine you're a biologist tracking some rare animal. You've got limited resources, mountains of data, permits to deal with. Now your team's cut in half. Suddenly, fieldwork's delayed, analysis piles up, decisions that could, literally save a species are on hold.
That's a very real impact. And it goes beyond the environment, too. The Washington Post reported that the National Park Service fired 1,000 people, but then hired 5,000 temporary workers.
Yeah, I saw that.
That sounds kind of chaotic.
It does. And it makes you wonder about the long-term planning here, the quality of the work. Will these temps have the same training and experience? Will projects even continue smoothly? It's hard to say.
So we've got impacts on the ground, questions about expertise, planning for the future, and this clash between needing to be efficient and actually managing something as complex as our public lands.
Exactly. And don't forget, this is all happening with those concerns that already existed about environmental protection under Trump.
Okay, so we've laid it out. Sudden firings, this Musk-inspired push for efficiency, and some potentially serious consequences for how the Interior Department actually works. Where do we go from here? So we're really getting into some interesting stuff here with this whole Trump efficiency experiment.
Yeah, it is pretty fascinating.
And this whole shrinking the government thing, this isn't new, is it?
Not at all. We've seen it over and over.
Different administrations, different approaches, but always with that same goal, cut the government down to size.
Right, cut the fat, reduce waste, all that.
But looking back, it doesn't seem that easy, does it? Has anyone actually managed to, pull this off?
Well, it's a mixed bag. I mean, some have made small cuts, but then a lot of times the next administration just reverses it all.
So what's different this time? Is it just that these firings are so big, or is there a different approach at play here?
I think there are a couple of things that stand out.
Like what?
First, the sheer speed. I mean, thousands of people across all these different agencies just gone like that in a matter of days.
And remember, these are people who are already working, contributing. It's not like a theoretical cut. These are real people out of a job.
Exactly. And the second thing is this focus on probationary employees. Legally, it's clever because they don't have as many protections.
Right.
But it makes you wonder, is it really fair?
It almost feels like they're using a loophole to, push a political agenda. And it doesn't help that we don't know how they chose who to fire.
Absolutely. If it's about efficiency, wouldn't you target jobs that are actually unnecessary, no matter who's doing them?
Okay, let's say, just for argument's sake, that Trump's right about all this, that there's a ton of waste and these cuts will make things better. Are there still, like, downsides to this approach?
Oh, definitely.
Really? Even if we say a smaller government is better?
Even then, there are always risks, unintended consequences.
Like what? What should we be watching out for?
Well, first, think about morale. Imagine you're working at Interior, and suddenly thousands of your colleagues are gone. Just like that.
Yeah, you'd be freaked out wondering if you're next.
Exactly. And that kind of environment, well, it's not good for anyone.
Right, everyone's scared to take risks, to try new things.
Right, and nobody's doing their best work when they're worried about getting fired.
And then what happens? Then you need to hire new people.
Exactly. Who's going to want to work there if you might just get fired out of the blue?
So even if you save money at first, you might end up with like a worse workforce in the long run.
Exactly. And then you have the problem of expertise. A lot of the people they fired, they were new, yeah, but they still had skills and knowledge.
Right, they were learning, getting that on-the-ground experience.
Right, and it takes time to train new people.
So you're like losing all that institutional memory.
Exactly, and that could be really bad in fields like, say, environmental science, where you need people who understand the issues.
So even if you hire new people, they won't have that same level of understanding.
No, and they won't have those relationships that were built over time with communities, scientists, other agencies.
So we're already seeing some of those unintended consequences, lower morale, loss of expertise, and maybe even worse work being done.
Right, and we have to remember, this is all happening while they're trying to do this incredibly complex and important work.
Right, the Interior Department, they manage everything from national parks to oil drilling. And that doesn't just stop because you fired people.
Exactly. So even if the goal is to be more efficient, the work still needs to get done.
Which makes me wonder, will these cuts even actually save money?
Right, because even if you get rid of positions, someone still has to do the work.
So what happens? Everyone who's left just gets more and more work piled on them.
That's often what happens. People get burnt out, they make mistakes, and then things become even less efficient.
It's like that balloon analogy again. You squeeze one part, another part bulges out.
Exactly. And then sometimes the government has to hire private companies to do the work, which actually ends up costing more.
So they're trying to save money, but they could actually end up spending more.
It's definitely a possibility. It just shows how complicated this all is.
It's definitely not as simple as just cutting jobs and assuming everything will be fine.
Not at all. And then there's the whole issue of oversight. If there are fewer people working for the government, it's harder to keep an eye on all these industries and activities that affect the environment.
So are you saying that trying to protect the environment could actually lead to more environmental damage?
It's a real concern, and a lot of environmental groups are worried about it.
It sounds like we're being pretty pessimistic here.
Well, it is important to look at both sides.
Okay, so we've talked about morale, expertise, efficiency, oversight, a lot of potential problems. But what does this actually mean for, like, the work that's being done? Can you give us some real-world examples?
Sure. Let's take wildfire management. The BLM, they're key for preventing and fighting wildfires, especially out west.
Right.
But with fewer staff, things like controlled burns, those help prevent huge fires. They might get delayed.
Makes sense. What about, like, permits for things like grazing or mining?
That's another area where we could see delays. If there are fewer people to review applications and do environmental assessments, everything slows down.
So even though the goal is to be more efficient, things could actually get bogged down.
Exactly. And then there are the impacts on things like research.
Oh, right.
The Interior Department has all these scientists studying things like climate change, endangered species, all that. And that research is used to make decisions about how we manage public lands.
But if you're cutting scientists, that research is going to suffer, right?
Of course, projects get delayed, data collection stops, those long-term monitoring programs, they all get disrupted.
So even if we don't see big problems right away, these cuts could really weaken how the Interior Department does its work.
That's right. And it shows that this isn't just about budgets and numbers. We're talking about our public lands, the environment, the whole ecosystem.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Morale, expertise, those specific impacts on things like wildfire management, even scientific research, all because of this so-called Trump efficiency experiment.
Yeah, and I think we've shown just how complicated all these systems are. It's not as simple as just, cutting and expecting everything to run better.
It's not like turning fat off a steak, is it? More like messing with a delicate ecosystem. But the story doesn't end here. What happens next?
Well, there are a lot of things to watch for. It's going to be interesting. First, those lawsuits about the firings.
Right.
Will the courts agree with what the administration did, or will they say some of these people were fired illegally?
Because if they do, the Interior Department might have to rehire people or pay them off, right?
Exactly. That would be a huge blow to this whole efficiency idea.
And then you've got Congress. What are they going to do?
Right. Will they try to step in, maybe with the budget or those big hearings they have? Or will they just let the administration do whatever they want?
Well, knowing Congress, I'm guessing we'll see some fights over this. But even beyond the legal stuff, the politics, what about public opinion? Could people push back and make the administration change course?
That's the big question, isn't it? Like if people see the national parks getting run down, or permits taking forever, or endangered species not being protected,
Yeah,
that could
yeah.
change how people feel about all this.
It's one thing to talk about being efficient, but when people's vacations are ruined, or local businesses suffer, or our natural treasures are threatened, then people really start to care.
Exactly. And then we have to see how these cuts actually work in practice, right?
Right.
Can the Interior Department keep things running with fewer people? Will we actually see a difference on the ground?
That's the real test, isn't it?
Yeah, if there's trash filing up in Yosemite or research projects get put on hold indefinitely, people are going to notice.
And what about those unintended consequences we talked about? Will we start to see them play out? More damage to the environment, less oversight of industry, maybe even more government spending down the road to fix the problems created by all these cuts.
It's possible. It's like we're watching this experiment unfold in slow motion. We made these big changes, and now we just have to wait and see what happens. It's kind of scary, honestly.
Yeah, it is. And it's important to remember this isn't just about numbers and budgets, is it? We're talking about people's lives, their jobs, their communities.
Right? These are park rangers, scientists, firefighters, people who've dedicated their lives to taking care of our public lands and the environment.
And how's this going to affect them in the long run? Will they want to keep working for the government after all this?
That's a great point. I mean, if this is how they get treated, why would any talented young person want to work for the government in the future?
So it's not just about the cuts now. It's about who's going to be around to do this work in the years to come.
Exactly. It all makes you wonder, earlier you mentioned this idea of running the government like a business.
Yeah.
Maybe that doesn't always work.
It sounds good, right? Efficiency, cutting costs, all that. But maybe those ideas don't always work the same way in government.
Right. I mean, a business, their goal is to make money. But government, it's about serving the public, protecting our resources, thinking about the long-term health of our environment.
And maybe those goals need a different approach, different values, a different way of measuring success.
Yeah, maybe. So as we finish up here, I want to leave our listeners with this. Efficiency matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. We also need to think about how effective things are, whether they're fair, and what'll happen in the long run because of the choices we make.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. And to everyone listening out there, keep learning about this issue, talk about it, and hold your elected officials accountable. The future of our public lands, our environment, maybe even our democracy, depends on it.
Well said.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the Trump efficiency experiment at the Interior Department. Thanks for listening.